Hey everyone, so happy Wednesday. I am live streaming this. I'm going live in order to get this to you in time, in order to get by noon, as I promised each week to do. But as I'm streaming this, I see myself on the screen kind of going back and forth and kind of freezing. So best here at church. So if I cut in and out, I apologize for maybe if this goes well, maybe we'll try more live streaming stuff here at church through this. But today's video, I'll be pretty brief and simple. I just want to check in. What are you doing in this time to continually wrestling is kind of the we're cooped up inside. We can't go out into our about community. We can't even go out into our community without the fear of this virus. Learn to stay 6 feet away from people. We can't shake hands. We in many ways are living in a time where it's nearly impossible, at least community as we have grown accustomed to it. Community and as I watch the news, as I listen to precautions, there's this phrase that I keep hearing that kind of causes a little anxiety in me, or kind of stirs me up a little bit, and that is this phrase, self-isolation. Usually it's used in terms of someone who's contracted this virus. They say they're self-isolating at home. But I've even heard it to be described shutting themselves out of this and self-isolating themselves from this world in this time, whether or not they have it. And I want to be us to self-isolate. I understand the term in the medical sense, someone else, but I want to be cautious with how we view this time of social distancing, this time where it's necessary for us to distance ourselves, to isolate ourselves. It should be the opposite of self-isolation, where we should be seeking out ways to stay in community, to be in community with one another. In that because much of what we have taken for granted about face-to-face with people, being these things that we have taken for granted about community, we've come to define community in that way. But community is simply just the ways that we stay connected, the ways that we are connected to each other. And while this virus may cause us to be distanced from one another, it is to be isolated from one another. We still should be connected from one another. Or passage to point us to in this, but I do have the just we are created to be connected in community. And in the creation, Adam and says it is not, and sees that it's not good for man to be alone. And in the of Israel, as we not as people being in their individual isolated lives to each other as one people, as one nation, the nation of Israel. Then when we get into the New Testament, we see that God with our whole heart, soul, and mind. And then the second command Jesus says is to love our neighbor as ourselves. Implies community, and neighbor implies that we are early church. We see the early church and the church itself described as not individual Christians, individual believers off living their isolated lives, but we see the early church described as the body of Christ. We see church defined as the body of Christ. Church being something where we are as intimately connected to each other as the parts of our body are connected to one body. And so we are created for community. God's purpose for us is that we would seeking out ways that we can stay in community. And that looks different than how it did maybe a month ago, to be found in the simple, old-fashioned way of writing a letter to someone. Maybe this is a time to restart the tradition of having a pen pal. We have all of this technology at our fingertip with them. You can see their face. You can not lost. And so we need to be intentional about how we stay in community, even in our worship, even in Sunday morning worship together now online. We need to be found in that. Watch, they've clicked on it, and we're time that they are, or we stay connected in worship with our neighbor, inviting them within the CDC guidelines and within your comfort zone. Simply just taking someone a meal in this time, taking someone a meal or offering to go grocery shopping for someone who's maybe at a higher risk and is fearful of going out. These are all ways that prompt you and talk about the importance that it is that we find and keep community in this time. And while it may be challenging to do so, still to be found in this time. And so I encourage you to work at ways that you can find community in this time. So as you go off on this endeavor, may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now